guys, this is Mike back with another video, and today we're going to be doing another build. We have our Strike X Aero Cool case, open case build, and some of the tools that we're going to be needing is, of course, wrist strap. You want to make sure that you are safe at all times during the build, as well as standard screwdrivers. I like these because these are magnetic, so whenever you're dealing with the small screws, you make sure that they hold on with the magnet. All the parts that you will need for the build will be in cases like this, and you can find those in the shelves towards the back of the classroom. You could find this case. It's going to be in the back room on the shelves as well, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to be going one by one, talking about the parts of what we're going to be putting into this guy. So, first thing, we have our power supply from Thermaltake, the 600 watt power supply. Provides enough juice. We have our Intel Core i5 CPU, DDR4 RAM. Alright. DDR3 RAM. I'm using all 4 slots. Standard hard drive. The beast that will put it all together. We have our Gigabyte ultra durable H97M motherboard. So let's get started. Okay, so first off, I want to make sure that everyone is grounded, for just in case, for everyone's safety. Please do wear your safety wrist straps during your build. We're going to go ahead and start off with the motherboard. We're going to open it up. You tell how it's in the anti-static bag. Want to make sure static is something ideal. Okay, so before we can put the motherboard inside the case, we want to make sure that the standoffs on the case are equal to the holes that are on the motherboard. So that's what we're going to check first. Make sure every standoff. Okay, so some things that you want to make sure that you're aware of are the standoffs inside your case. Sometimes the holes in the case are not the exact same as the holes on your motherboard. So, for example, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those standoffs are okay. They work well with the motherboard. However, other holes like this one here and this one here that are on the motherboard are not on the case. And so that's the reason why we're going to have keeping a few of these standoffs on the motherboard, just so we make sure that the motherboard is secure and safe. Okay, so some things that you want to be aware of are the standoffs. You have several standoffs on the case that might not be the same with the motherboard. For example, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those 4 are fine because they match the motherboard. However, other holes, such as the one here and the one here, are not going to be able to fit for your motherboard, and so that's why we have left a few of these clear standoffs on the motherboard. That way we make sure that the motherboard stays secured and fastened to the case. Everything else that does match can get screwed on. One thing you want to know that's important is your faceplate. You want to make sure that the faceplate is inserted properly. Another thing is, if you look, for example, how it is placed now on the left side, you have your in and out audio jacks. You want to make sure that that is aligning with your motherboard and not flipped around, because if it is flipped around and you insert your motherboard, you're going to have it on the wrong side. So you want to make sure that the faceplate is inserted correctly and it's matching those ports with the ports on the motherboard. Once that's done, we can now insert the motherboard, and you can see that they are matching now. Once you have your motherboard aligned with the faceplate, now you want to make sure that the holes on the motherboard are aligned with the standoffs on the case. So you want to just move the motherboard around until you see that standoff to the hole. Then you can start taking your standard screwdriver and inserting the screws onto the motherboard, like so. Alright. And we'll do that for the rest of the holes. Nice. Alright, motherboard is in. Alright, next is going to be the CPU. Like I said, we have our Intel Core i5 CPU. This little guy right here is going to do all the magic for our processing. One thing that you want to make sure you also have is some thermal paste. Why? Because you need something that will cool the CPU. And we do have a fan attached to a heatsink, but we need a layer in between the two, and that layer is where the thermal compound is going to take place. So it's going to be placed right here in the center of your motherboard. We do have a cover, CPU cover on the motherboard right now. We can go ahead and take that off. So now you see all the pins. Those pins that you see there is going to be matching with these pins. Now one thing very important is that there's an arrow or a triangle on the CPU. That triangle is going to indicate which way you position your CPU. That way it locks in place and you don't break any pins. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we see that the triangle is facing on this left corner here. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that that triangle is also placed on the left side. And then we just place it in. It should lock in place, like so. Now we can put this back over it. And your CPU is in place. Next thing what we're going to do is your fan slash heatsink, but right before we're going to put some thermal compound on it. You don't have to apply too much, just apply a little bit. Probably fine, right? Alright. And next what you're going to do is just with your finger you want to pass it over the entire, try to get the majority of the CPU covered with it. It's like a filler. So you see, trying to get the majority of the CPU covered with that thermal compound. Once that's done, we're going to insert our fan slash heatsink. So you notice on the heatsink you have 4 pins, or 4 standoffs. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 holes on the motherboard. That's going to align there, like so. You gently push down and you'll hear a click. rotate. That will indicate that they're locked. And last, you have your cable to power that fan, and it's going to go in CPU fan. Like that. Okay, so after that's done, you'll notice you'll still have some compound on your finger. It's alright, you just have to take a disinfecting wipe and it should do the job, and it'll take off that thermal compound. Comes right off. You have a brand new finger again. Now next thing we're going to do is the RAM. So we have our DDR3 RAM. For this build, for this purpose, we already have the heat sink over the RAM, but that's okay. Something important though that you want to make sure of is the gap that it has down here where the pins are. You want to make sure that when you are inserting your RAM, that this gap aligns with what's on here on the motherboard. For example, we have it here on the right side, and I'm holding it on the left side. So if I were to place it inwards like this, that would not work. So you want to do is flip it over, make sure it aligns, and when it does, then we're good. For this build, we're going to be doing the gray channels. So you want to make sure that you have your notches put aside, and then just align everything, make sure everything's aligned, that's important, and gently insert your RAM. Now when you press down, you're going to hear a click from the notches, like so. That's how you know that it's in place. Hear the two clicks, RAM is good. Alright, now we're going to do the second one. Something important also, this happens to everyone, is that when you apply pressure to the RAM or to any cards, sometimes the motherboard tends to bend, which is something we want to avoid at all costs. So when you're inserting your RAM, just have a finger or two holding the motherboard down. That way when you put the RAM in, it's not bending the board. Alright, now RAM is in. Alright, after the RAM, we have our front panel cases. You can see here, we're going to have LEDs going to those. We have our USBs as well as our audio. And these are the cables that correspond to those. So we can start off with the USB 3. Blue is USB 3. Good to know. Hold your motherboard, make sure nothing bends, and insert. Next we have our audio. Alright, next is going to be the audio, which is found back here. USB. Oh, right here. Cool. Sweet. USB is in. Now these guys are important where you place them because they are very small. They're going to go here in this corner. If you notice, when you read, if you look up close to the motherboard, you're going to be able to read different labels. So each pin corresponds to each one of these. So it's important to know that. For example, on top corner over here, we have our power LED and our power switch, the two smallest ones. So we're going to go ahead and put those in. We have our hard drive LED, which is going to go corner. We have our power LED and our power switch. Alright. This is... Can I just put these in the other USB? Okay, cool. That's what I'll do. We're going there. Other fan. Going over here. Okay, we're going to do the hard drive now. Right now the hard drive is in this glove. This glove is very important because, you know, it keeps the components that are in the back, like so. This keeps it from, you know. Okay, one cool thing about this case that I forgot to mention is that the power supply is going to be going in the back, and your hard drive is going to be going here in the front. There is a wall. For this case, there's a wall in between the hard drive and the power supply, and that wall has several ports. You have your SATA port, and you have your Molex port for power. So the cool thing is, when you slide the hard drive in, it'll slide straight into those ports, and then on the back side is where you can connect the cables from the power supply. Make sure you align your hard drive. Align the holes. Once that's done, simply make sure that these are aligned and slide it in. Once it slides in, it will connect with the wall that I had mentioned earlier. Now we can move on to the power supply. Power supply time. Alright, so one thing we want to do first is put the faceplate on the power supply. And once that's secured, you can insert the... If you guys haven't noticed already, we have a bag assigned for every part. This bag is for power supply. Like so. So now we're going to be inserting the power supply with the cables going in first. And then there are holes inside the case at the bottom and on the side for you to stick the cables, the wires. Okay, so we have our wall that's there. So the first thing we want to put in is your Molex and your SATA. Alright, so the SATA power is going to be going upwards towards the optical drive, and we're going to have our Molex power for down at the bottom for the hard drives. So I'm going to go ahead and put SATA on top, right there, and I'm going to go ahead and put Molex down here. After that, we're going to take our data cables for SATA. We have one on top for your optical and one on the bottom for your hard drive. Make sure that the data cables for your SATA, the L shape, is aligned with the L shape on the port. Alright, once those are in place, we can now insert the rest of our power supply cables. Alright, so two important cables that we're going to be using is the P1 power and the CPU power. Those are the two that we're going to be having go across the case to the motherboard. All the other cables can be tucked away in the space, in the opening space, for later usage. But for now, we're just going to be focusing on these two. Let me lift it. They should have two people helping them, right, for this part? I'm guessing. It would be preferred to have a helper for this part. And these that we're not going to be using can be tucked, folded into space. Nice. So as I had mentioned before, we were only going to be using the main power, CPU power, and the two SATAs. And so that's what's coming out here at the bottom. Everything else is going to be tucked away in this little opening. Now if you notice over here, for the rest of the case, we have slots. And that's where you're going to be inserting these cables through. So for example, CPU is going to go up through here, all the way through until he gets to the motherboard. We do the same with the rest. So main power up through here. That also helps with cable management, so that when people look at your case, look at your build, everything looks nice and neat because all the cables are running down here where it's not visible. Same with the SATA. we can just put a little twisty tie here if you prefer to have it secure in place right there, and then the rest can be connected on the motherboard. After the hard drive, we're going to put in our optical drive. Optical drive is going to go up here on the top half of the case. We have 3 slots, so you could have, you know, a DVD, a Blu-ray, and whatever third that you prefer. So we're going to go ahead and insert the optical drive. Just slides in just like that. And in the back is where we're going to have our cables, our SATA cables, to connect the optical drive.